Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here for the T1D Diabetes and Me Summit 2019. And we're going to be interviewing Ginger Vieira today, and we're so happy to have you here, Ginger. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know her, let me tell you a little bit about Ginger. She's lived with type 1 and celiac since 1999 and fibromyalgia since 2014. She's authored 4 books, Pregnancy with Type 1 Diabetes, Dealing with Diabetes Burnout, Emotional Eating with Diabetes, and Your Diabetes Science Experiment. So she's obviously really had her hands in everything to do with diabetes. She also creates content regularly for Diabetes Strong, Healthline, HealthCentral, DiabetesDaily, EverydayHealth, and her YouTube channel. So there's lots of places to check out all of her content. And her background includes a BS in professional writing. She has certifications in cognitive coaching, Ashtanga yoga, and professional training with several records in drug-free powerlifting. She lives in Vermont with her 2 kiddos and her dogs. And we have so many questions for you, Ginger, because it seems like you have a wealth of information. And we have, support boards that have lots of questions. And I hope you don't mind that we're going to dig right in, because you really are an expert hero living and authoring detailed answers to common questions that we have. So we're going to break it out into a couple sections today. I'm going to talk first about emotional eating with diabetes and yo-yo dieting and the effects that it can have, because that's one of the things that I was reading about in one of your books. And the connection between food and emotions is established from birth. Obviously, it's something that's, innate, right? From the very first time a child cries and it's comforted. And it continues to become stronger as we grow, but with type 1, it can become more complicated. What age or after diagnosis would you say food and type 1 becomes an intimate love-hate relationship? Or do you believe that it can become that?
I mean, immediately in some ways, right? My only real memory of being not diabetic was when I think about, I used to eat strawberry Breyers ice cream as like my main dessert when I was a kid. And I remember being able to scoop ice cream into a bowl and not counting the carbs, and it's really within the first year of having type 1 diabetes, I was diagnosed at age 13. Now everything is a little task and it's a job, and you have to think exactly about what's in that bowl. And sure, there are positives to that. Everybody on the planet would benefit from having to think carefully about what they're about to eat, right? But we have to constantly. Like, you cannot eat a meal without the work and the kind of, is this a good meal? Is this good for me? Is it bad for me? It's immediate, and there's no way that it doesn't impact your relationship with food.
Yeah.
No matter what age you are.
Right. I think that, in my household, I think that, they were actually told right out the gate that it wasn't about restricting carbs, but it was save those carbs or those fast-acting carbs for treating lows. So the highs were sort of restrict them because it's not going to make you feel good, and save them. And so it kind of made this sick and twisted relationship, in that, it seemed almost restricted. But my kids were diagnosed many years ago, and so it might be different today. But I was
diagnosed in 1999, and we were told, eat all the sugar-free Jell-O that you want. There's that's so horrible for you. It tastes like chemical, And then eat as much sugar-free angel food cake as you want. And it's like, ugh. It's just, it teaches just what you said. It teaches kids oh, if I want to eat some candy, or if I want to have a cupcake, I need to have a low blood sugar. And so then when you do have a low blood sugar, you think of it as this is my one chance to eat those yummy fun foods. And it creates it can be really self-destructive and really detrimental. And it's totally unnecessary. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, I actually, just in our house, was a couple of nights ago, my daughter had 4 lows in the night, and, we don't know why. She might have been, I think she was doing some kickboxing or something earlier in the day, and we just miscalculated and probably ate a little bit less dinner than she usually did. And so she ended up having 3 juice boxes, a protein drink, and I think she had, I don't remember what else it was. 3 packs of raisins. And by the time she woke up in the morning, she didn't want to have breakfast. She was so annoyed that she had to have all that food. And as a teenager, she was like, oh my gosh, do I seriously have to eat something else? Because she felt like she had consumed all this food in her sleep. Yeah. And it was, it really makes for a really tough relationship with food. And so I think that it's really great that, that you're talking about this in your book, because a lot of us, type 1 or not, we struggle with our relationships with food. It can be really hard to separate it. So for you, when you separate type 1, you talk about, the need for using food as medicine, obviously. How often is it truly a struggle with diet compared to the average population, would you say?
For anyone with type 1?
Yeah.
I mean, it's this funny thing, right? Because food can save our life. Food can raise our blood sugar and damage our health if our blood sugar goes too high because of what we ate. So food is constantly medicine, right? But even when it's hurting us, we still need it. An alcoholic, for example, can just avoid alcohol, right? Because they know it's not good for them. We can't avoid food. We still have to live around it. We still need to deal with it several times a day. But we have to be so careful around it. And it's impossible to do it perfectly. And who wants to eat 100% perfectly all the time? That only backfires. So it's like, for me, when I think of food as medicine, that is really, that phrasing, I use that to apply to how I treat lows. I don't use foods that I really enjoy eating to treat low blood sugars. I use foods that I actually don't like to treat lows. I'm going to save the cupcake for when I am home and enjoying my evening, and I know what my blood sugar is, and I can enjoy the cupcake. That's not an emergency, right? And I don't feel bad for eating either, because I'm going to think about the carb count and the fat count of the cupcake, right? And dose my insulin carefully. And if it's a cupcake, I'm going to take more insulin like 3 hours later, because it takes so long to digest. But if I'm low, I'm going to use like dried cranberries or juice. Like, I'm going to use things I do not like. And I also use gummy lifesavers, because I would never eat that like as a snack, but they're really, I can tell exactly how many carbs I'm going to get. I don't have to do a lot of chewing. I've learned how to just take one half and swallow it whole. Because when you're a type 1 and either you just ate or it's the middle of the night, you're just like, I do not want to eat food right now. I love being able to just swallow the carbs and not have to actually chew the sugar, because it's just,
Yeah.
So I would really recommend that people think about what you use to treat lows, and how you're thinking about that food to treat lows, and how often you abuse the food that you currently use to treat lows. If you are regularly overeating and abusing food because of low blood sugars, you need to start thinking about choosing different foods and creating some guidelines for yourself. Like, this is how I treat lows. Right? I just did this as though I'm Catholic, but it's like, for me, it's that serious that I will not go and eat half a box of cookies to treat a low blood sugar, because the damage that creates for the rest of my day, let alone my long-term health, is exhausting. So my book I just really want to help people overcome that binge eating cycle around low blood sugars.
Yeah, well, that's actually a really good segue into the next question, because I often hear that, the evidence of this binge eating is, finding food wrappers, or finding yourself feeling guilty because you have eaten a whole box of cookies after a low, or, this sense of feeling like you overate because you had this, to anyone who wasn't diabetic, it would feel like a desire. But when you're diabetic, it almost feels like a medical necessity. But
right. It's like total emergency.
It's an emergency. It feels like an emergency.
Like begging you. Your brain is begging you for more glucose. Like, feed me, feed me. It's like, And, I certainly have I've had severe lows where I do eat way more carbs than I need to. But I do it. I even say to myself, like, I know that I am not going to feel good unless I eat a big bowl of cereal for this load. And I know I don't need a whole bowl of cereal for this low. So I'm going to take insulin to cover the extra carbs. And, you know, a bowl of cereal, it might say it's 50 grams of carbs, but it affects you more like 100. And that's something that I really decided personally for me is because when you do have a low blood sugar, your glycogen stores are depleted. That's your backup sugar. That's what your liver dumps out to help save your life. And for those severe lows, they need to be replenished. And that's part of why your body is like, feed me, feed me, feed me, because it wants to replenish those, but it still needs insulin to replenish those. So it comes back again to being honest about what you're doing, how often you're doing it. And if you are going to binge and you just know, I don't care what Ginger said, I'm going to binge during this low, be honest with yourself about it and take insulin to cover all the extra carbs so you're not stuck on a crazy roller coaster, you know?
Yeah, that roller coaster is, it's a tough one. And I think that the self-talk that, you know, that you're sharing with us out loud is probably really helpful for other people to know that they're not alone. You know.
And another part of that is using lows as an excuse to eat foods that you've normally said are off limits. You know, you've told yourself you're bad for eating, like pizza, bread, cupcakes, whatever, that starchy thing. Personally, I've had type 1 now for 20 years. I have found so much freedom and balance by saying that nothing is off limits. I can eat whatever I want all day long, but I know I feel best when I eat A, B, and C most of the time. And I leave room for, you know, I don't care about really bread or anything. I would choose homemade gluten-free brownies, right? Or homemade gluten-free whoopie pies. Like, I'm going to save space in my day's worth of calories, not carbs, but just, you know, we all can only eat so much in a day, or should only eat so much today. And I'm going to make room for that by choosing really healthy things most of the time so that I can enjoy the other things. You know, and it's just realistic balance. No rules. The rules are suffocating and they just lead to chaos.
Well, that is such a healthy way of looking at it, because I think actually that's probably where a lot of the control issue comes from, is like when there are all these rules around it, is because when you have type 1, what I've heard is that it feels like everything is out of your control. You can't control your blood sugar. Sometimes you feel like you can't control what you're allowed to eat because you have all these rules and restrictions. So but I'm hearing you give yourself this freedom with boundaries, though. Freedom with boundaries.
Freedom with common sense. You're not going to feel good if you're eating tons of carbs all day. Nobody, diabetic or not, should be eating tons of carbs all day, or drinking soda all day, or eating cupcakes 3 times a day. Be smart. Eat mostly plants, some healthy sources of protein, fats, yada, 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 and have a treat. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. I think that's sort of like, I think a lot of people talk about that as like the 80-20 rule, is like eat healthy 80% of the time and treat yourself 20. I don't know if you believe in that same kind of thing.
I love the 80-20 rule. Love it. I think it's my book, actually.
It's sort of, that's what I tell my kids, because they're always like, why do you buy all the healthy stuff in the house? And I was like, well, because you're here 80% of the time, and 20% of the time I can't control what you're eating. So if I can keep you healthy while you're here, then I don't have to worry about what's happening out there. So, my next question is that I wanted to ask you about what makes dieting with type 1 different. So for those people who maybe don't have that natural sense of boundaries, people who, who feel like they need to use the term dieting because they aren't able to make a lifestyle change or create this 80-20 rule in their life.
Create the lifestyle changes, right? The only reason I've come to a place of those freedom boundaries is because I've practiced following a lot of other people's rules and figured out how I feel about them. You know, I don't want to do them anymore. So I think one really important thing to remember when you're dieting, or if you've made a big improvement in how you're eating, like let's say you've suddenly cut your carb consumption down by 100 grams. You used to be eating 200, 300 grams a day, and now you're down at 100 to 150 grams a day. It isn't just your insulin with meals that's going to go down. Your overall background insulin is going to need to go down, or you're going to have tons of low blood sugars. And that I find people often it's frustrating because they start exercising more and eating healthier, and then they end up just low and craving food, right? And then it's like, well, what is the point? And they get so deterred and frustrated. And you really, within a couple days, you need to drop your background. If, let's say I'm eating, I take 12 units of Nitras every night. Let's say that I suddenly decided to go down to 50 grams of carbs a day. I'm going to need to drop my 12 units down to 9 or 10 within a day or two, because I will start seeing lows immediately.
So is that, if somebody's not comfortable making their own adjustments, is that a time where maybe they should be sending in their reports to their endo or to a nurse or to somebody who maybe has a little bit more experience than they do?
Obviously, you should talk to your diabetes educator if you're not comfortable making your own insulin dose adjustments. A huge thing that I think is essential to thriving with type 1 diabetes, and when I say thriving, I don't mean perfection, I just mean being in charge of your life and not letting it be in charge of you, is learning how to adjust your own insulin. Jenny Smith, who is one of the top CDEs under Gary Shiner, she and I wrote Pregnancy with Type 1 Diabetes. And it's even more magnified, because a diabetes educator doesn't know that your diet changed. They can't necessarily see exactly why your blood sugar is plummeting. By making a decrease in your long-acting insulin of a total of 1 or 2 and never more than 3 units changed at a time, the risk there is minimal. For a day, if you've made too much of a change, for a day you might see your blood sugars running a little too high, right? But that's it. And then I need to, I had decreased it by 2 units, but maybe I really only need to decrease it 1 unit. And the overall rule is you never make a change that's more than 3 units at a time.
Okay.
For me, 3 units would be a lot. I only take 12 units, right? But for somebody who takes 35 units of Lantus, 3 units is a little.
Right. And everybody's different, obviously.
Everybody's different. Small changes, lots of checking on your blood sugar, think logically about what's going on, but really the people who are going to thrive with type 1 diabetes are the people that learn how to make adjustments and insulin doses on their own.
Yeah, I think that, making those adjustments on your own is super empowering. And maybe we can help people out as well do you have any tips on understanding the differences between hunger and emotional eating? Because I actually learned from talking to Gary that type 1s have, and I don't want to get into all the medical stuff, but that, sometimes the alerts that let them know when they're hungry can be off. I'll just simplify it that much by putting it that way. And so how can you tell the difference between hunger and emotional eating? So if you have a low blood sugar, obviously that's one thing, or if you have a high blood sugar, but does it begin to confuse your body and from trusting yourself? How do you know, when you're really hungry?
When I'm really stressed out or upset about something, my body wants me to go eat cupcakes. I hear it loud and clear. Some people have an inclination for it: alcohol, cigarette, soda, pasta, whatever. Absolutely, my body craves chocolate when I am upset. And I have to be honest with myself about that. And I can say, well, yeah, you're hungry for cupcakes because you're really stressed out right now and your brain knows that what feels it. But I know from being alive for 34 years that eating the cupcakes doesn't actually make the stress or whatever I'm upset about go away. So it really, again, comes down to being honest with yourself and saying, I have this habit of going to eat whatever when I'm upset or stressed out. Does it help me feel better? What else happens when I do that? Again, does it actually help the situation? And what are the consequences that come from it every time I indulge that habit? It doesn't help me. So being able to stop and say, I know I'm not hungry for cupcakes, I just had dinner, and I know that eating a cupcake isn't going to make me feel better. For about 30 seconds, maybe, right? But after that, not so much.
Right. Yeah.
And hunger, you feel it down in your stomach.
I'm pretty sure my eyes get hungry, my tongue gets hungry, my heart gets hungry, my stomach gets hungry. Sometimes I feel hungry all over, actually, Ginger. I don't know. But
my friend will go out to dinner and I'll be so full, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so full," and then she's like, "But the dessert section of my belly is not full." I'm like, "Oh God, I don't have room for a dessert section in my belly." Sometimes I bring her cookies and I give them to her right after dinner. I'm like, "Please don't try to get me to eat Ben and Jerry's after dinner." We do that. Like, so I give her a cookie so she won't try to get me there. But it comes down to being more honest with yourself. And if you don't like what you keep getting because you keep binging, you have to change what you keep doing.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned alcohol, and actually, what is your advice on the consumption of alcohol? Because does it affect everybody the same or different? I know everyone's, they say online, like, your mileage may vary. But I have 2 teens, and I'm going to have the talk about alcohol. And I was kind of hoping to get some pointers today, if you don't mind. So if you could, be the cool aunt for a moment and tell me straight, like, if they're going to drink more than 1 glass of beer or more than 1 glass of wine, or, what are some strategies that are important to remember, not just for teens, but for anybody, honestly? Because
I think drinking in college, advice for someone who's going to be drinking in college is so different than advice for someone who's going to be drinking as a type 1 as an adult. Because in college, you're going to push the boundary. And I know I certainly had one night where I look back and I feel grateful to be alive. I know I took my Lantus insulin before I got too drunk. But I know I got really sick that night because I had too much to drink. And I was unconscious. I really was for most of the night. And I had good friends that put me in bed, but they didn't know to check my blood sugar. And I woke up, my blood sugar was like 115. And it was just good luck that all that puking didn't drop me lower and that I had taken my Lantus before I got too drunk. And, that was really like one of 2 times I can say I pushed that boundary. And I woke up thinking, I am lucky, as a type 1. So that is really an important conversation to have with teens who are headed to college, for sure, about what really happened. In general, for me, I know I have friends my age or older who are, adults who say if they have 2 glasses of alcohol of any kind, their blood sugar plummets while they're sleeping. I don't notice that effect at all. I take insulin to cover the sugar in alcohol if there's a significant amount. Mostly I try to stick with seltzer mixed with like rum, so there is minimal sugar, right? So I can eliminate that variable completely. So I'm not adding insulin to something that's already complicated. But you really have to, like with anything, just like going for a walk, you have to look at the variables and see how it impacts you. Walking for an hour before dinner, I haven't taken insulin in 3 hours, fast acting insulin in 3 hours, doesn't drop my blood sugar. Having 3 glasses of wine doesn't really drop my blood sugar, and I need insulin to cover the sugar in the wine. I know some people who are like, "Oh, I don't need it because my blood sugar is going to plummet later. I need sugar from the wine to prevent that." I don't have that problem. So we all process alcohol differently. I think I process mine very quickly, and maybe someone processes that very, very slowly. You really have to be careful and self-study, take notes, consider it a little science experiment.
All right. Well, that's important, I think, for everybody, especially now that, type 1 can happen at any age. And people can drink alcohol over the age of 21 legally. And so if people are getting diagnosed at the age of, in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s, I was at a retreat and a woman had been diagnosed in her 50s. And so they've already got drinking patterns and habits. And so this is all new for them. And so I think, what you said is really important. Treat it like a science experiment and write it down, test it out, especially if you think you might not remember it.
Right. Of course. Exactly. You will not remember it. Treat alcohol like a treat. It's poison. It increases insulin resistance. It's not good for you. You don't need red wine to be healthy just because of the stupid studies that say it's good for you. Alcohol should be, a couple times a week at most. If you're drinking alcohol every day, you're going to pay the price at some point.
Okay. Those are some good tips. Thank you. So how can those people who care for type 1s or even type 1s who care for themselves help to create healthy environments and supportive environments?
In general?
In general, yeah, sort of. Well, you as somebody who, I'm assuming if you've been trained in yoga, you do yoga. So this might be a leading question now that I've said that, but what are some of the important things to do when you've got, a chronic medical condition, whether you're a caregiver or somebody who's experiencing it themselves?
Yeah. I think for someone who loves someone who has diabetes, the best way you can support them is to actually ask them what kind of support would you like. Because one person might want a reminder to check their blood sugar before dinner when they all go out to eat. Another person might be like, mind your own business. I don't need somebody telling me what to do with my disease. This is very personal. It's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Get after it, right? When it's teenagers and kids, mom deserves to know if you've checked your blood sugar or not. That's mom's job, right? But if there's a way that there can be kind of an agreement of, we are going to check in, and let's agree on how often mom's going to check in so that the child doesn't feel like it's constant, right? Maybe it's once a day. We look at the day's blood sugars. Maybe it's once every other day. Maybe it's twice a week. Just so that the person who has diabetes still gets to feel as though this is there. Because it doesn't matter what age you are, this is my disease, and it's very personal. Every blood sugar reading makes us feel a certain way, whether we like it or not. And sharing those blood sugar levels with another person, even if it's mom, is like reading my diary.
That is a really good way to put it, actually, because I think that that's probably a voice that is, you're articulating what a lot of kids probably can't articulate, that they want to say because they just don't have the words to say it. Because I do know that, there is a lot of, when my kids were finally able to say it, they said, every time you text us to say, hey, correct yourself, they said, we know we're already high. We feel the consequences, so, we got to that point where it was, that, decisions needed to be made and conversations had to have. And, as an aside, my kids are going to kill me for, talking about them so much, but I hope that it helps other people learn, but we'll just go with your story in this case about what you said and how that can help other people.
And you have to back up in order to let your child step in and step up to the plate, and they're going to make mistakes and they're not going to necessarily do it the way you want them to. And that is inevitable because they're going to leave the house. Like it is their disease. At some point, it has to feel fully like their disease.
Yeah. Although I did accidentally once text one of my adult T1 friends and said, correct, please. And she was like, thank you. She's like, do you do that for all your type 1 friends? And I said, no, just usually for my kids. But by the way, does that sound naggy? And she was like, no, I wish my mom did that for me. So, but I don't know if she was being serious or just, but we'll just.
Everybody's different, right? And every dynamic is different. And what feels like support to one kid is different to the other. So you have to talk about it. And
that's a really good point.
Dad also have to acknowledge, like, we get that you are really concerned about us, but if you harp on it, and I'm not implying that you're doing
right,
this,
yes,
happens, right? It then can drive a huge wedge between the child and the parent, and diabetes becomes like a weapon. You don't want that. Like, diabetes needs to be managed, but everybody's got to let life happen around it.
Yeah, definitely. The second topic that we're going to segue into is actually the sad reality that despite taking all of these, discussions and understanding conversations, is that anxiety and depression and stress are a really big part, of diabetes for a lot of people, and that those things alone can impact blood glucose levels. And you authored a book on dealing with diabetes burnout. So obviously amongst many others, but are there any easy to remember tips or advice that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think the very first thing that, like, for me especially prevents my stress or anxiety about diabetes from becoming large enough that it consumes any bit of my life is that I give myself permission to feel it. Like, diabetes sucks. Of course you're going to get stressed out and feel crummy because of it, mentally and physically. It's so much work. It never goes away. It's always right there. It's like a newborn baby that never grows up. And even when it's sleeping, you have to think about it all the time, right? You have to take it with you everywhere you go. And when you're sleeping, it doesn't care. So, like, we should expect to feel anxiety and stress and a little depression over diabetes because it's so much work. And the minute you give yourself permission to feel it and kind of give yourself credit for feeling it, like, you're human. It's so normal to feel this. I'd be shocked if you didn't. I'd be a little worried about you if you didn't, right?
Yep.
So I think that's the first step. And then sometimes the next step is to just let yourself feel it for a few weeks and maybe back off on the pressure of what, Dr. Wolanski, he calls it a safe diabetes vacation, where you kind of let the reins loose a little bit. And let's say that you were normally aiming for a blood sugar of 140. Now it's, maybe for a week you let yourself aim for a blood sugar of 200, just to let the pressure off. And then go back to your usual goal. But still, regardless of what the goal is, if I see a blood sugar of 250, I have two options. I can beat myself up for it and be like, oh my gosh, look what you did. You suck at this. Or I can say, oh, okay, whatever I just did didn't work out the way I was hoping. Brush it off. Take notes if you need to. Next time you eat whatever it was, this is how much insulin you'll probably need next time, since 5 units didn't work today. And then let it go. And you're just, every day you're doing the best you can. And there's not a single thing in the world that anyone shows up for every day and they do 100% perfection at. Except Michael Jordan. You just to be more forgiving and talk yourself through it. And yeah.
You are amazingly inspiring and such a positive person. I feel your great energy through this call. I just wanted to say that. I hope everybody else is feeling it out there because you're amazing. It almost feels sad to be talking about anxiety and depression with you because you're just so happy and so settled with it. But I think that it's important because you've come through it. Obviously, you're out the other side. So I want to help other people. Why do you think it is more likely that type 1s do experience the depression and the anxiety? And what exactly is type 1 burnout? I think I just asked you 3 questions in one, but.
Well, so that's a good thing to differentiate, right? Is burnout versus depression. Diabetes burnout affects your life with diabetes. Depression affects other parts of your life. So if diabetes might be part of your depression, but if you are not socializing the way you used to, if you're struggling at work, struggling at school, pushing people away, not taking care of yourself just in general, let alone diabetes, that really is that's depression, and that should be handled as depression, which means you should probably talk to your doctor and maybe get a referral to a therapist, and maybe consider, depending on how ongoing this depression is, consider antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. Diabetes burnout means I'm really sick of pricking my finger and I'm really sick of counting carbs and I don't want to do those things anymore, but I have to, otherwise I won't be alive tomorrow. And pinpointing the difference is important, and also writing down what it is about diabetes that you're burned out on. If it's counting carbs, take the pressure off and wing it. Wing it. You're still taking your insulin. You're still going to be alive. You're still checking your blood sugar, but you're just taking some of the pressure off. You're doing the version to you that you can sustain. If counting every gram is something that you can't do for another freaking day, fine, then wing it. Loosen the reins a bit. And same with, if someone has really been avoiding checking their blood sugar at all because they just hate seeing the number because of how it emotionally feels, right? And it's so much work to deal with. You don't have to go from 0 to 6 times a day. Start checking your blood sugar once a day. Just check in the morning and then the next morning. And when you're ready, maybe you'll want to start checking twice a day. That's progress. You don't have to go from 0 to perfect in anything. Do the best you can today to stay alive.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think my kids wish you were their mom right now. Should you bolus for emotional blood sugars? I mean, I know that, emotions can change your blood sugars.
Yeah.
Do you bolus for those?
Personally, I find that the bolus doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
My blood sugar will not go down until the emotion has gone down.
Okay.
So, I would say, like, let's say powerlifting meets in my personal experience, and before I speak at a conference. Both of those things I'm really excited to be doing, but I'm inevitably kind of nervous about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good nervous, right? But the morning of either of those events, my blood sugar starts going up and it wants to sit in the mid 200s. And I can take dose after dose, and it will not come down until the event is over. And the only thing I have found that really affects that, by the time I got into like the third powerlifting meet, and I didn't want to be competing with a blood sugar of 250, right? I would increase my Lantus insulin the night before by a pretty big amount. When I was powerlifting, I was 30 pounds heavier. I was taking, I think, 18 units is a normal dose. So the night before my powerlifting meet, I took like 21, 22. One time I did 23 units. And that kept my blood sugar in the low 100. And it made me actually able to stay down there despite all the adrenaline from the meet. So you can't always do that, though, right?
Right.
And I'm not going to do that before a conference. I'm just not, because I'm not confident that a conference is always going to make my blood sugar high. And the conference is this long, the powerlifting meet is this long, right? So Sometimes you just got to ride it out. And I check often, and I'll take 1 unit, hope it brings me down, check again, didn't make any difference. We can't always fix every high, and hormones and emotions that trigger those hormones are a great example.
Yeah. That ride it out actually ties in well with an article I read last night that actually had to do with depression, not necessarily with type 1. It said, if we treat the people we love who have depression like they have the flu, we wouldn't tell them to snap out of it. You can't snap out of the flu. But if we actually said, snuggle up in your blanket, let me bring you some warm tea and ride it out, maybe that we would have some more compassion. And so maybe sometimes these emotional blood glucoses as well, if we help support the people or love ourselves to get through it and say, you know what, this too shall pass, then, maybe we'll be a little bit easier on ourselves. And I think I'm learning that from talking to you. So thank you too, that it can apply to emotional BGs as well. So, so not just emotions, but it sounds like stress obviously affects blood glucose. And I mean, everything. Obviously, I think if there was a book this big, of everything that can affect your blood glucose. But is there, any tips or tricks that you've learned that you would share with anybody, as just some pointers in life and emotion or anything? I know that's sort of like a huge one because, my next question has to do with a magic wand. So this one is sort of yours.
In general, I know that the way I personally, my friend always says, I'll say, I'm really stressed out this week. And they're like, really? This is you stressed out? I'm like, I keep my stress pretty internal most of the time. I have my moments, but part of what helps me get through it is reminding myself that I can handle it. Whatever's happening, figure it out. I can handle it. I have in the past, I will in the future, and I can right now. And it's all nobody's life is free of stress. You can drive down the road and be like, oh, that's a beautiful house. I bet they're happy all the time. They're not. They have stress too. So we all have to just learn how to talk ourselves through it, because that's your only choice. It's your only choice.
Yeah. Well, that actually is sort of my magic wand question is if your type 1 magically disappeared one day, do you think that your stress would too? Do you think that that's like the biggest piece of stress in your life? I know this is a strange question, but I think that people often ask, like, if you could take away one thing, like, would you get rid of your diabetes if you had to trade it for X, Y, or Z? And I don't know that every type 1 I know would say, yes, that's what I would give up because, for some people it can be manageable. For other people, it's really challenging. So for you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to personality too, right? There are studies that show that type A personalities, thrive more with type 1 diabetes because we get that satisfaction from obsessing about little details. Would I love to not have type 1 diabetes? Sure. But is it the biggest stressor in my life? No. It's just this tedious thing I deal with every day. And there's some days that it is more tedious than others, right? And it interferes with life, but I don't let it stress me out because I know it's still going to be there an hour later tomorrow and the day after. I can't waste energy wishing it wasn't there because it is,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think life is going to be full of stress no matter what. And if you don't have type 1 diabetes, something else in your life is going to fill that bucket because nobody's life is perfect.
Well, Ginger, you've been so inspiring to talk to you today. And if our audience wants to learn more about your work or how they can connect with you, do you have, you want to give a little plug on?
I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Just got to make sure you spell my last name right, and then you'll find me. Most people can't, though. Vieira.
All right, and we have links as well for people to follow.
Amazon, all the books are on Amazon and YouTube. Silly diabetes videos on YouTube. I'm everywhere.
All right. Well, everyone, be sure to check Ginger out, and thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you so much, Ginger. You've been great. And everybody, I hope that we've all caught Ginger's smile today because it is surely infectious. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.